If you think you don't have any chance at getting an RTX 3070, I'm going to tell you don't be discouraged. I'm going to tell you your best chances at actually finding it in stock, as well as doing a build guide. What CPU to pair with this RTX 3070? What motherboard? We're going to talk about everything you need to know to do a really awesome build and actually have a chance at finding it in stock. Let's get started. Hey guys, Tiago with Classical Technology here. You know what to do. Subscribe, smash the like button, etc. So let's start talking about the RTX 3070 GPU. I'm going to sum it up really quick for you guys. $499 MSRP, performance as good or better than a 2080 Ti, which used to be $1,200. Absolutely phenomenal performance for the price that you're paying. The biggest issue here, we're going to jump right into it, is stock. No need to waste your time. If you think stock is going to be an issue, if you can't get an RTX 3070, well, I'm going to tell you, don't get discouraged. I'm going to actually tell you your best chances at finding one. The RTX 3070 launch, believe it or not, actually was a little bit smoother than the RTX 3080. Even though it may not seem like it on the surface, I even did a poll with my own viewers, and after thousands of votes, it seems like around 13% of you guys were able to get an RTX 3070. And of course, that's still a low number, but it's much higher than the RTX 3080. In fact, even looking at reports from the local Micro Center stores, it looks like they had over 100 GPUs in stock. So certainly a lot more people got them in stock. And that's why I want to tell you guys, don't get discouraged. I've seen them pop up here or there in stock. That's why you should follow me on social media down below. Anytime I see something in stock, I always try to relay it out to you guys. A lot of people have actually gotten lucky with this. So you can find it in stock, but you're going to have to work extra hard. The number one way that I'm going to say, and this I know is not applicable for everybody, that's going to be Micro Center. It continues to be one of the best ways to find stock. To give you guys proof, on Zen 3 launch day, when the AMD Ryzen 5000 CPUs came out, after the store had opened within the 10 minutes, I went in, of course, to get a Zen 3, and I was able to get a voucher. This is what they give you when you go in the store. Basically tells you can buy the newly released item up until 3 o'clock that day. This basically guarantees that you can get whatever was released that day. Some people were there before the store even opened, such as in the case with the 3070. I got there within the first 10 minutes, and this is the Zen 3 launch, but they also had RTX 3000 series GPUs available because that day shipments also came in. And if I had wanted to, they even had RTX 3080s and even 3090s in stock. Of course, they didn't have all of the different varieties. I believe the ones they had were like the MSI Ventus or something like that. I could have bought them. The people that were there got them. So if you have a local Micro Center, if you're lucky, you'll potentially be able to snag a shipment that day. So it certainly is possible. Now, for those people that don't have a Micro Center near you, there are various other ways. The next best way is definitely going to be EVGA. Now, they have their queue system, so sign up for all of those notifications. A lot of people have gotten their GPUs from EVGA, and I think the EVGA GPUs look really awesome with the industrial design. They're very, very good GPUs. So that's definitely a way to go. Go to Newegg, sign up for all of the notifications, and if you keep in mind that the 3070 actually has just a regular GDDR6 VRAM, that means that there are going to be more of them available, as well as because the price is a lot cheaper than the 3080 or 3090, NVIDIA and the partners are making them in greater quantities, and the proof of this is seeing how many people got 3070s as opposed to the lower numbers on the 3080 and 3090. Then of course you can also check Best Buy. Occasionally they'll get stock as well. Remember, if you want the Founders Edition, Best Buy and Micro Center, pretty much the only places you'll be able to find them. Newegg is not going to have them. I know these seem like simple tips, but it's because they actually work. Either go personally to Micro Center, sign up at EVGA or Newegg, just keep doing it day after day, and eventually something will come in as stock gets better. So many people have been able to get it. If you just give up and don't try it all, or just check like once a day and refresh the website, you're not going to catch the correct timing. Now let's talk about what CPU and then what motherboard should you be pairing with an RTX 3070. Now, I tested and benchmarked all 4 of the AMD Ryzen 5000 CPUs, and I'm going to tell you, if you're building a PC now with the 3070, just go for one of these Zen 3 CPUs. Now, even the 5600X, which comes in at $299, it actually pairs really well with the RTX 3070. Of course, if you're doing the 3070 with the 5600X, the reason why I think it pairs pretty well, the RTX 3070 is going to tell me that you really want a great performing gaming GPU that's as good as a 2080 Ti. But you don't necessarily need a 3080 or a 3090 if you're going to be doing a workstation or rendering. Don't get me wrong, the 3070 can do video editing, it can do a lot of things as well, but it's geared for the 1440p gamer and even a little bit of light 4K, but I would say it's high refresh rate 1080p and 1440p is really going to be the sweet spot. Now, the 5600X has single core performance and IPC, low latency, that's really rivaling the best from Intel. It has gotten very close in certain benchmarks and certain games. Of course, it's still going to be 6 core versus 10 core. 6 core 12 thread in 2020 isn't particularly the best deal. Maybe when the 5600 comes out at closer to $200, that's going to be a better sweet spot for the 3070. But for now, I think if you want one of the new CPUs, and these are a lot easier to get, I was able to get one myself off of Newegg, and like I showed you the voucher here, Micro Center, I wasn't even there as soon as it opened. I was there maybe 10 minutes after. They had plenty in stock that day. So you can actually find a 5600X in stock. It's realistic. This isn't something that is going to absolutely disappear. It's not easy to find in stock right now, of course, but if you look, you're a little patient, you definitely will be able to find it. So the first CPU I would pair with it is a 5600X. And now, why do I recommend the 5600X as opposed to the 3600 or something from Ryzen 3000? Those CPUs, they're going to bottleneck the RTX 3070. There's no way about it. Now we have enough benchmarks, enough tests that we see, especially during 1080p high refresh gaming, even 1440p, a 3600 bottlenecks sometimes to a pretty large degree in RTX 3070. So a 5600X, you're going to minimize your bottlenecks, and in fact in gaming a 5600X is a lot of times pretty close to a 5900X. It's not as big of a performance difference between those two as it is between a 5600X and a 3600. So let's talk about a few motherboards that I've personally used and can recommend to you guys. And this actually is going to have a very important footnote. Remember, Ryzen 5000 is compatible with X570, it's compatible with B550, and even A520. But you're going to have one of the newer BIOS versions installed, one that's already out now. So if you have a Ryzen 3000, just update your BIOS. For example, one that's like 1.1.0.0. If you look at your BIOS, you'll be able to see exactly what I'm talking about. If you have an older BIOS, let me give you an example. I bought the Asus X570 Impact, brand new from Micro Center, within the last 2 weeks. As soon as I tried to actually put a Ryzen 5000 CPU in it, it wouldn't boot up at all. I got a cold D0, and of course I tried a couple things like RAM, but I knew that there may be a little suspicion that the BIOS that it came with, even though it was a brand new motherboard, wouldn't be current enough to be able to plug these in out of the box. Thankfully, the Asus X570 Impact has something that's called BIOS Flashback. That means you can actually update the BIOS without having a CPU at all. If you guys remember the previous Ryzen versions, AMD actually sent like a cheap CPU just so people could plug in that older CPU and upgrade their motherboard without having to buy an older generation CPU just to make it compatible with whatever is new. Well, if you have BIOS Flashback, you don't have to worry about that. So basically, how do you do this? Well, you just put the BIOS on the USB stick like you would with any other type of BIOS update. You plug it in where it says BIOS in the back of the motherboard, you hold the button for 3 seconds, and then it's going to go for a little while sort of blinking, and it's going to update the BIOS while the system is off. And after the light turns off, you can take the USB drive out, turn it on, and you'll see you're going to update to the newer BIOS. And after I did that, I plopped the Ryzen 5000 CPUs right in the motherboard, and it worked fine without any problem. And now I'll recommend a few motherboards to you guys that I have personally tried as well. Let's talk about the one I just mentioned, the Asus X570, the Crosshair Impact. Now, this is a little bit of a specialized motherboard because it's the mini ITX, meaning it's like a mini ITX motherboard, but it has that little extension. Basically, it just has a much better sound card. And of course, everything performs really well on a motherboard like this. It's really geared towards high-performing CPUs. This is going to be if you're going to be building sort of in a smaller case or something like that. The benefits, it has that BIOS flashback just to make sure that you're going to be compatible with the new Ryzen CPUs. It also, of course, is going to have that PCIe Generation 4. That means that all of these new GPUs come out, as they start to take more advantage of that, that's going to be even more and more important. And of course, you can do PCIe Generation 4 NVMe drives. This This has a little add-in card that it comes with the motherboard. You can put it right on top of where the GPU goes. That way, it's really easy to swap in your NVMe drives in case you have to change them in the future. Overall, if you want a high-performing, very small motherboard, you can get this, or if you want to save some money, there's a $250 Asus, the ROG Strix I. That's going to be the smaller version. It basically doesn't have some of the features that this one has, but it is considerably cheaper. If you're going to be doing mini ITX, and the RTX 3070, especially the Founders Edition, is a smaller GPU in terms of its footprint, you can definitely put it in a smaller case. That's probably my second choice, but the Impact, I understand it's going to throw a lot of people out of budget, especially if you're going to only be putting the 5600X in there. You don't need this motherboard for that. This is really for the 59 and 5950X, especially if you plan on pushing those a little bit further. So that's just the main important thing that you have to know between these two motherboards. Now, if you want something high performing, but of course that's not going to break the bank, I've recently tried the X570 Asrock Taichi motherboard. Now, this also has the BIOS flashback. It's actually really nicely fully featured motherboard. You're going to get Wi-Fi on it. You have, of course, more slots for PCIe Generation 4 GPUs, as well as NVMe drives, so that way you can take full advantage of PCIe Generation 4. This motherboard you could really pair with any of the new Ryzen CPUs, including the 5600X all the way up to the 5950X. I think it performs really well, aesthetically looks great. It MSRPs for around $270, which is going to be much cheaper than the MSI Ace. It's also going to be cheaper than the Asus, the Hero, which is going to come in probably about $100 more. Overall, I think it's going to be one of the better motherboards in that price range. Of course, there are many different motherboards. I'm really just telling you the ones that I've actually used and can vouch for. Their features and their performance really meet the standard that you need to have in a really nice gaming PC. So what else should you put in your RTX 3070 build? So I actually did a build here. This is the Maingear Vybe case. This case I purchased from Micro Center. They have a bunch of different colors. I went with red because AMD is Team Red, and I knew I was going to throw the new Ryzen 5000 in there. Of course, NVIDIA is green, but I decided to actually liquid cool it with this really cool Apex unit from Maingear as well, just because it integrates perfectly in the case. And I was using this case as my test system, swapping the CPUs out. I still do that. And with the soft tubing makes that possible. If I had done hard tubing, I would have a very difficult time removing CPUs and changing them out. I wanted to sort of test everything in the system, if you guys saw my review. And I actually decided to do blue because first, I actually really like the way red goes with blue. A lot of computers, it can get a little bit tedious, a little bit boring when you just see like black and like a clear fluid or something like that. This blue really pops out, looks really good. This blue coolant, I thought against the red, really pops out. And you can even make the joke that the system is red like Team AMD, but it's sort of running on the energy of Intel, which is Team Blue, in order to cool the Ryzen CPUs. But anyway, the main reason, the real reason, is I just like the blue against the red. Of course, I was liquid cooling this because I was trying a 5900X, a 5950X. I would not recommend those necessarily for the 3070, and I don't recommend you liquid cool a 5600X. I think that with a 65 watt TDP, you really don't need to liquid cool it. I wouldn't say you should use sort of the stock cooler that it comes with, but throw on at least a 240 millimeter AIO, I would say, or even a really good air cooler like something from Be Quiet, Dark Rock Pro 4, or if you want to save some money, the Shadow Rock 3. I've tested those coolers before. They function really well, and I think they're actually perfect for a CPU like the 5600X. Another important thing to consider will be the power supply. Now, technically, you can get away with as low as maybe a 650 watt power supply. I wouldn't go any lower than that. I just like to have more headroom and better quality power supplies, but I would recommend you guys get maybe 750 or 850 watts. This test system that I built actually has a 1200 watt Maingear ignition power supply, but that's absolute overkill, and that's because I had a 5950X in there, as well as I've tested a 3080, even a 3090 in the same case, so I just needed headroom for different configurations. So I would say to be safe with a 3070, I would get 750 watts of a good brand power supply. It's going to be a nice sweet spot. So to summarize, the RTX 3070 is a great GPU at high refresh rate, 1080p, as well as 1440p. So I would really pair one of the new Ryzen CPUs along with it, something even as low so is the 5600X, will give you great performance, not too much bottlenecking. Previous generation Ryzen certainly will bottleneck it more, so I think the sweet spot will be one of these new CPUs. And like we mentioned for the motherboard, get something with a 3600 megahertz RAM paired to it, and make sure you get a motherboard if it has BIOS flashback, and some of the more expensive motherboards do. Even the cheaper Taichi does at around 270 bucks. Definitely will save you a lot of headache, just in case the motherboard you get doesn't have an updated BIOS and you don't have a Ryzen 3000 to throw in there. And in terms of the actual RTX 3070, I did a separate video on if you should get a Founders Edition or a third-party GPU, so remember to check that out as well. Since the 3070, especially the Founders Edition, is a generally smaller card, you can certainly fit it in a lot of cases. In the build that I did have it vertically, but that's really more for show. Anytime I would do benchmarks or actual gaming or actually use the system, and I would turn the GPU horizontally on its side, because you never want to put a GPU right up against the glass. It looks pretty awesome, but if it's a GPU with fan spinning, you're going to restrict all of the airflow, so I completely recommend against that, unless you have a case where the GPU goes far back enough that you still have airflow. Alright guys, so I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you have any questions down below. Remember to subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next video.